Hey everyone, this is Victor from Cyborg for Life, and today I have a very special interview for you. Today I am joined by Michaela. She is a former limb lengthening patient who had a discrepancy, and now she's a life coach who's helping patients, who had orthopedic reconstructive surgery, post-op patients thrive mentally and emotionally as well as physically after surgery. And both of us have gone through this journey before, limb lengthening that is. And if there's one thing that we know is that recovery, it's not just physical, it is also mental, and there's emotional struggles as well. So we're going to talk about what it actually means to go through this process. And Michaela's going to share how she became a coach and why she believes that coaching is really beneficial for patients who are going through this arduous journey and how it can help them thrive on the other end. Michaela, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Victor. It's good to see you.
Before we get into it, I just want you to kind of briefly share your limb lengthening background and what led you to start your coaching career.
Absolutely. So, like you said, I'm a former limb lengthening patient. I guess the trajectory of my life completely changed when I was 10. I was playing in a soccer tournament and I broke my leg. Subsequently, that break, 5 years later, turns out that break actually went through my growth plate. So I ended up having to have a limb lengthening procedure when I was 15. That limb lengthening procedure, it's an arduous process. And I was in physical therapy for, I think, 9 months. And that led me to have a heart for healing. I went on to then become a physical therapist. And through my own journey as a patient and then working as a physical therapist, I just saw this immense need for emotional and mental support for patients going through orthopedic surgeries because they can be really long and really just challenging on your mind. And so that's kind of what led me to create Soul Strength Coaching, where I help clients through the post-op process, pre-op and post-op.
I think that's incredible because a lot of patients that I've talked to in the limb lengthening industry and just outside of that, in just the orthopedic industry, they always mention, when will I recover? When they say recover, they always talk about the physical aspect. But you just mentioned it, I mentioned it, is the mental aspect, right? Because the mind really does matter and it carries the body through this process. But what were some of the biggest challenges, mental or emotional, that you faced and experienced during your recovery after your surgery?
Absolutely. I think that's such a good point. One of the biggest challenges I faced was the loss of identity. I had always identified as an athlete. And so going through this limb lengthening procedure, I was no longer a soccer player. I was no longer a runner. I was no longer an athlete. And that just kind of really struck me and kind of hit home. I felt this deep sense of loss. And I see that same exact thing in the clinic as a PT and also working with my clients is they have this sense of loss of their identity. We always talk about goals and what people want to achieve physically. But like you said, it's how are we going to make those goals achievable and how are you going to get through the day-to-day of that process and stay mentally strong through that.
Absolutely. If you think about it, whether it's limb lengthening, some sort of orthopedic procedure, because I'm sure you've worked with patients who have had other, sports injuries like ACL, reconstruction and whatnot. When you said a loss of identity, when an athlete is out there doing their thing, they're in their zone, they're in their element, they feel great. But once they're taken away because of a physical ailment, now the isolation seeps in. They feel misunderstood, misidentified. They feel anxious about the setbacks. Will I ever get back to where I was and become who I wanted to be again? And these struggles with their body image and their identity, it starts to kind of creep into the physical aspect. Do you feel that this is a bigger issue than someone who may face a physical complication, this mental obstacle?
I do, Victor. I think the reason why it's so challenging too sometimes is because it's not often talked about. We talk at length about complications from surgery, infection, lack of bony growth, complications from hardware malfunctions, but we don't talk about depression or anxiety or this loss of identity. And I think that that's why things are so challenging because it's not really tangible. But when we can identify it and we can say, hey, I'm struggling, or hey, I do feel this loss of identity, I am feeling isolated, then we can kind of take what you said, right? Am I ever going to get back to being this athlete? We can reframe that mindset and say, hey, what is this teaching me? What can I learn from this that's going to therefore make me stronger in the long run? So we can kind of just flip the narrative there.
I love that. And did you ever hit a breaking point where you wondered, should I even continue on this journey of the sport? Should I let soccer go? Our minds are our own worst enemy. Sometimes it's it just starts to kind of pull us back and push us down. What was your support system like, and what did you gravitate towards to kind of leverage yourself back onto your 2 feet?
That's such a great question. And that's one of the things that we talk about most is having a good support system. And I think one of the things that really started my determination was right from the get-go, my surgeon, Dr. Rosbrook, shout out, he's amazing, incredible. He's helped so many lives. But he told me two profound things on the first visit with him. He said, "You're going to need a limb lengthening surgery. No ifs, I'm going to need it." And also, almost in the same breath, he said, "You're going to be better, faster, stronger." And I think I just internalized that. And so I just made that my driving force from then on out. And so that kind of fueled me. And obviously, I just kind of surrounded myself with family and friends who were uplifting. And I had friends who would come over and just sit with me, or my mom would sit with me and watch my shows, take me out in a wheelchair, right? So support system is so important, but you also have to go back to that mindset of why are you doing this in the first place too.
I think the why is huge. For me, for my own journey, I felt like setting small, achievable goals was huge because I say it all the time. Look, bodybuilding was my sport. Before that was track and field. I was always a physically active guy. And when I had, whether it was my first broken leg from getting hit by a car to roller skating to then eventually my third broken leg with limb lengthening, which was elective, I always felt like, man, I have to just keep going. And I built this mental resilience, and I call it, my cyborg mode essentially. And basically this mentality, the cyborg mentality that gives me this grit or mental resilience to keep going. And I feel that there's different elements and aspects to that. And one of them is setting small, achievable goals, like just walk 10 extra steps today, or, try to get more range of motion in this certain body part, or get a little stronger here, and just kind of climb your way along. But I'm not going to lie to you, Michaela, it was hard, right? And how did you go from how much further I have to go to recover fully versus how far I've come? Like the glass is half full versus, half empty. How did you do that?
I knew all along that like I needed to track progress, right? Now I do it in a more like succinct and documented journaling type way. Back then I would had this like routine that I would do every single day. And I would tell myself, like, I don't know where I heard this, but somewhere along the way I heard get 1% better every day. And so I would have this routine where I would get up, eat my breakfast, take my, pills, whatever, and do my exercises in the morning, afternoon, and night. And so I had this sense of routine still, which obviously, speaks to an athlete or anyone who is used to going to work every day and just kind of getting in a routine. So you have to have that routine, things that you can kind of say, hey, I did that. I can check that box and say, I'm proud of myself for completing that today. Honestly, sometimes it's, did I get up and brush my teeth? Did I get up and go to the bathroom? Sometimes it looks differently every day, but you just have to try and move the needle, take that 1% and get better 1% every single day.
I love that. Just 1%. That's it. Just one more. Yeah, that was another one of my favorite books. One of them is Grit by Angela Duckworth, and another one is Just One More by Ed Milet. And it's just talking about just one more, and you're saying 1% more. That's incredible. Michaela, like now I kind of want to kind of bridge into how we can talk about your coaching and emotional support and that mindset shift that you can help patients with, because I talk to a lot of patients, and that's why we're doing this podcast on this platform, because we want to bring to patients' attention that it's not just about the physical. Because when they think, oh, I'm going to get, leg length discrepancy surgery to fix, my discrepancy imbalance, or I'm going to get cosmetic stature lengthening to boost my height, whatever have you. They think, oh, it's just about breaking the legs, doing the stretching and letting your bone recover. But a lot of them find out, and I've consulted with hundreds of patients, is that it becomes lonely. This journey becomes lonely. But I want to kind of talk to you and basically break down the routines and how you basically go about coaching people through this process. What inspired that, and what do your clients typically need help with when they go through from the very beginning, maybe before surgery to right after surgery, and then let's say it's a limb lengthening process where it does take a couple months?
Yeah. So oftentimes clients have the same, I would say top like 3 or 4 things that they come to me concerned with, right? It's the fear of the unknown, the fear of the pain, right? The isolation that they might feel. Okay. And maybe this sense of, what if this doesn't fix X, Y, or Z? What if this doesn't fix my confidence? What if this doesn't fix my pain? And what if I don't heal? Right. So it's really an overarching fear of this loss of sense of control. And what I've found, whether it's like with physical therapy patients or my clients, it's this lack of control that kind of stirs things up in your brain and you don't know where to start. So we break it down in coaching. I have this framework that I use. It's called the 4 pillars of recovery. And it's really awesome because if you can tackle these 4 pillars, like you are pretty much almost guaranteed to be successful, just because you can really hone in on focus on the things that you can control. I'm sure you felt it too, Victor, in your recovery. When you were going through it, there were so many things that were out of your control, but you probably just innately focused on the things that were within your control, which is kind of like what I did. You focus on how you can show up for yourself physically, how you can show up for yourself mentally, and how you nourish your body, right? So I guess to start, the four pillars are nutrition and fueling. So how are you putting nutrients into your body? Are you getting enough nutrients? Are you making sure your body is getting proper nutrients to support healing? The second pillar is rest. So rest is truly our body's time to heal. Sleep is literally like a cleansing mechanism. It's how we kind of get out all of those toxins, and everything just kind of sweeps through and clears itself out. So sleep is very, very important. It's super hard the first 6 to 8 weeks after surgery, right? Because you have so much inflammation, so much pain, so much swelling. So that's number two. Number three is movement, obviously, right? So are you following your guidance from your physical therapist, your doctor? Are you moving in a way that supports your healing? Are you moving too much, too little, just the right amount? And can we tailor anything to kind of help you create habits that you're going to be more successful in your movement? And number four is, if not the most important thing that we work on, is self-talk and motivation. How are you speaking to yourself? What are you saying about yourself and to yourself? And how is that going to propel your recovery? This is something that we never really talk about, but if you really dive in and you ask the patients and the clients who are successful versus the ones who are not, the ones who are successful were the ones that kept telling themselves, I got this, I can do this, I'm strong, I am a warrior. And they have that like grit, resilience mindset. And the ones who are maybe not as successful, or who don't get it as quickly, are the ones who are telling themselves the self-doubt. I'm not going to get better. I'm not going to get through this. I'm not going to get better, faster, stronger after this. So that one's a really, really big one that we kind of focus on in coaching, is how are you speaking to yourself? How can we work through some of those mindset shifts and limiting beliefs and things like that?
That's incredible. The four pillars, I love it. I think that's super, well-rounded, and it, everything is very cohesive, and it kind of works off of each other like a really nice gear system. Now, Michaela, you did send me two really interesting research articles. They kind of prove what you just said. This one, it was a commentary basically talking about the psychological resilience that really does promote positive outcomes after surgery. And, I thought this was a really interesting article because it did talk about ACL reconstruction patients, right? There was like 72 of them. Basically said that, the psychosocial factors are just as important as the physical ones, and that, surgeons and care teams, they should incorporate resilience boosting strategies such as emotional support systems, mindset and coping resources, and open empathetic communication, right? And if you just heard what Michaela said, her four pillars are kind of just like that. So she's kind of just mimicked the research in her own way, whether she knew about this research beforehand or she found out through experience. Integrating these approaches can really lead to better patient, satisfaction and better functional outcomes. So that's both a mental correction and a physical functional outcome. So resilience, it's not fluff, right, guys? This is like legit stuff. The research proves it right here. So I'll put the link below this video. You can read it yourself. But I think it's incredible. Michaela, if you want to comment on this article in particular of how it kind of aligns with your coaching methodology, that'd be great.
Yeah, Victor, this was gold to me when I found this article. I'm like, yes, insert me, insert me. It really begs the question, if we can get patients and clients stronger mindsets and better resilience preoperatively, right? This article basically proved patients who scored higher on that resilience score pre-op had better post-op outcomes. So if we could insert a coach preoperatively to help them build up that mental resilience before surgery, their outcomes after surgery are going to be even better. So it basically just goes to show that how your mindset is going to directly impact your recovery, which is just so profound. And I'm so glad we're finally starting to talk about it, because it's something that you and I'm sure both could have benefited from 10, 12 years ago when we were going through our surgeries.
100%. And I'm going to share the other one, this one from JBJS, another publication talking about the future of orthopedic care, right? Like basically these researchers, these PhD researchers are saying that psychosocial resiliency and orthopedic surgery is kind of the next step. It's not just about physical recovery, physical therapy and whatnot. And you are a physical therapist yourself, and you're now believing in, the psychosocial aspect of this. So that it works, but we're trying to instill that belief in patients and show that, if they want to bounce back, essentially, like right here, in the face of adversity, that, having these strong social support networks and this positive psychological well-being will lead to a better comfort and recovery outcomes in the long run.
Absolutely. I think this is the future of medicine in general, right? We need to start looking at things from a more biopsychosocial model versus just a physical model, and it has been in the works. We've been talking about that model for the past few decades, but I think now we're finally starting to implement that and really focusing on how is our mind, how is our psychological state impacting our recovery directly, and these researchers so beautifully put it together that hey, this is impacting it almost directly.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I want to talk a little bit about some of the patients you may have worked with, success stories of you coaching clients, so that patients who may be viewing this, prospective patients who may be considering this, can start to kind of understand why surgery coaching can be a beneficial resource during their process.
Absolutely. We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I had a client that I was working with, and she said something the other day, and it just really stuck with me. She said, I didn't realize that the fear of the loss of control was what was holding me back.
Mhm.
She's like, once I put a name on it, I felt like a relief wash over me. And she said she started like writing out all of the things that were out of her control. But then she made a list of all of the things that were within her control, and she realized there was so much more within her control that was without out of her control. And even those things that were out of her control, she had fears about, anesthesia, she had fears about post-op pain. Those were all things that she then discussed with her doctor, her surgeon prior to surgery. So it was really cool to just see she was building that resilience in real time by kind of taking ownership of those fears and just putting a name on them right then and there. That was really cool. That was a recent thing, and I was just like, you go, girl. It was awesome.
That's so powerful because like a lot of people, they just don't realize how, sometimes the mindset is what determines how long or how smooth your recovery goes, right? And it just shows you right there that she was worried about these different factors, different aspects about the surgery, the process, the pain, and all this stuff. And she basically talked about it. And I actually kind of did a video on this way back a couple years ago on my channel, and I said that the best way to kind of get over your fears about the surgery of limb lengthening is to face the fear. And it's as common as and cliche as that sounds, it's kind of true. But I think it's very hard for some, and this is why your service is so beneficial, because it's sometimes hard for us to kind of get out of our own way because we're like, that fear, oh no, I can't do it because of past experience, what the fear may be or the trauma from our childhood. But having someone either that has gone through it, like yourself, or has had success with other patients who have gone through it or something similar, now we have a combination of a patient and coach that can go through this journey together, being virtually handheld and really make a powerful recovery all the way through. You can do check-ins with your coach. You can now talk about the process. You can bounce your ideas and your fears off of this other person on the other end and then get feedback, but also strategies, right? Like it's so helpful to have that second, not only second pair of eyes, like if you're a surgeon or a physical therapist, but now a second pair of ears and voice to kind of give you that motivation to push through. Would you agree?
Absolutely, Victor. I think it's so multidimensional what you just said. I even think about myself in the clinic versus like when I'm coaching, and I can relate to doctors too. Like, these patients bring up these fears, and doctors don't always have the time to sit down with patients and unpack that, right? As a physical therapist working in a clinic, I don't always have the time to sit down with patients and unpack that. I do the best that I can. But now as a coach, we sit down, we unpack that, and we work on reframing and literally rewiring your brain so that you start to think differently and feel differently about yourself and your outcomes, right? So that is just beautiful in itself. And I always think about myself as a coach as like, picture yourself going on a hike and you have a road map. You're using all trails, or you're using like a traditional map, and you know exactly the path to get through it, right? You're good to go. Versus you're on a hike, it's getting dark and you don't have a map, you have no cell service, and you're getting lost. So the one option with the map is with a coach, right? That's your surgery process with a coach. The one option without a map is your surgery process without a coach. You don't really know where you're going, how to handle things, how to handle setbacks. But if you have a map, you know all of those things. And when those things come up, you know how to handle them.
If a patient did reach out to you, what would it look like? Let's say me, right? I'm a prospective patient planning my limb lengthening surgery, and I know that I have the clinic good surgeon. Okay, I have a physical therapist lined up. I have the nutrition. I know how to kind of do that, but I obviously will need to stick to it. And I just heard this podcast with you to help me through my surgery, and I'm like, should I reach out to her? Okay, how do I do this? Maybe I'll book a consultation. What's the next steps?
Yeah. Next steps are you should be a prospective patient or you are either in your surgery process right here, right now. Currently, I work with limb lengthening patients. I work with post-op total knees, total hip replacements, and rotator cuff repairs. So I work with a pretty niche specialty of orthopedic conditions. And I basically, to start working with me, you'll book a discovery call. We'll talk through some things, see if me coaching you would be a good fit. And after that, you'll decide which coaching package would be best for you. I offer a 6-week plan and a 3-month plan. Typically for limb lengthening patients, the 3-month plan is better because, as you and I both know, it's a pretty long process. We would meet together either weekly or bi-weekly, and we would kind of discuss any of the fears that you have, right? You would come to me with anything that comes up, setbacks, things like that. And we'd plan out that roadmap for you. I have worksheets that I can give you, things that you can work on independently, and then we can kind of meet together and discuss those things and create a plan for you that's going to make you feel strong, feel powerful, feel more confident in your journey to help you get to that end goal.
I love that. Would you even help coach the parents through the process? Because they're fearful. Like, this is their kid and they're seeing them in pain. They're seeing them go through this reconstructive process. They're seeing them, their child, right? They love their children more than anything. And now you have this amazing service that not only have you gone through it, but you're also been in the field of clinical orthopedics through your physical therapy rehab career. You can help parents as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think parents oftentimes have a harder time than their kids because kids can almost be innately resilient because they don't really know all the fears yet. But parents, they see the worries. What is this going to long term affect my child with? And absolutely, I saw my mom go through a lot of that. I'm sure you saw your parents go through that worry, that fear. But absolutely, yeah, I think parents, just as much as the patients going through it, can use some coaching and just basically just someone to talk through some of these fears with of the unknowns.
This resource is so powerful, and that's why I really wanted to, have you come on, talk about this. And I think that if patients wanted to reach out to you, we're going to have obviously your contact information below, but you also have a website and I think a blog you're starting. Can you talk a little bit about like some of your online presence and how patients can reach out to you?
Absolutely, yeah. So I have my website, which I'll have my Calendly link there as well, where you can set up a free discovery call. And I have a long list of blog resources, basically where we talk about like all things surgery and recovery, which is pretty cool. I've had a lot of my clients where they'll be going through something and I'm like, oh, I've actually written a blog about this, and I'll send that to them, and they're thankful for those resources as well. So that's a pretty cool free resource. And then I also have that optimal recovery log that I've created that I can, patients, if they want to submit like a Google form, and we've got that accessible as well, and they can just download that for free right after this call.
That's incredible. Look at that. Built all these free resources right in so patients can start their journey and then obviously reach out to you for the discovery call. I definitely will be, sharing this with all the different communities that I'm involved in. And I think that, having this resource is going to be powerful because as I kind of get back into the game here, I know that I'm going to be hopefully revamping a resource that I was working on in the past, just never really completed the project. And I think that hopefully we'll team up like the Avengers or something like that. And I think that there's a big, huge gap in the post-op recovery area of this journey. And I think that your service will be massively beneficial. And I'd like to kind of collaborate on future projects, but we'll talk about that. So, but everybody who's been watching, I want to thank you for, tuning in to this podcast. And if you feel this discussion was helpful, obviously I want you to kind of hit like, subscribe, share it with other patients, but reach out to Michaela, right? Like just book a discovery call. If you feel like, hey, I'm a prospective patient and I feel having that mental motivational coach by my side for check-ins, messaging, just watch what happens, right? Because you guys do it to me. You message me all the time, but I'm one person. But Michaela actually has a devoted service to this. And don't get me wrong, I'm gonna still do it as well. But she's specialized. She has her 4 pillars technique, and it works really well. It's worked with patients. Reach out to her, book your discovery call just to kind of see it, and make sure that if you see this and you know a patient who's going through it, share it with anybody who might be considering surgery, going through it, and is having a hard time, feeling lonely, isolated, and just might have that need for someone to talk to. So I encourage you guys to do that. Michaela, is there anything, final words of advice or any last words you'd like to leave with the listeners?
Absolutely. I think one thing that comes to mind is, and this probably would resonate with you too, Victor, is you could be the strongest physically strongest person in the world. But if you tell yourself that you can't do something and you don't believe in yourself, then you're going to face adversity every step of the way. So I think if you can have the opportunity to work on your mindset and work on building your resilience before a big surgery like limb lengthening, I think it's basically invaluable. It's worth it tenfold.
I agree. I agree. That's incredible. Michaela, it's always a pleasure to have you on the channel and, just share your amazing service. And we're definitely going to have you on many, many more times. But in the meantime, guys, if you found this video helpful, obviously do me a favor, hit that like button. Give Michaela some love if you found her discussion helpful as well. Share it down below in the comments or send her an email. She'll have her email down below, or visit her website. Yeah. And be sure to subscribe for more, recovery content like this. And until next time, this is Victor from Cyborg for Life and the amazing Michaela signing out. See you guys next time.